Fulgrim, my beloved. Good evening. Guess what? I'm recording within a month of my last video, so I'm keeping my promise pretty well right now. But hello! Welcome back! It's finally time to talk about this fucking book! That's right, it's finally Fulgrim time, and oh my god, do I have so much to say about this book. My my fucking video might be as long as this stupid ass book is. But before we begin, as always, spoiler warning. All of it's my opinion on tropes and stuff, especially this video. I have a lot to say that is definitely just my opinion and you do not need to agree with me. And, you know, I'm always critical of what I read, and I feel like this is a specific book that I am very critical of in many ways, and I'm just very excited to talk about it, even though I have an intense love-hate relationship with this book. Speaking of, Fulgrim is my 7th Warhammer novel that I've ever read. I finished this back in June of 2024, and I love this book. And I hate this book. It took me 6 weeks to read the first couple of chapters, and then 3 days to read the rest. This is either a book that you are going to like or you are going to hate. And I don't even know where to begin describing it. First things first, of course, obligatory meme. And second things second. Well, I've decided I'm going to do this video a little bit different because I'm going to start it off with whether or not I actually recommend this novel. Because like I said, you're either going to like Fulgrim or you're not going to like Fulgrim. And I feel like there's no in-between, and I want to get this out of the way, because part of the reason that you might not like Fulgrim is because of Fulgrim's content. Which, it shouldn't surprise you. It is a Slaanesh-focused book, so it's going to have some things that not everyone likes to read. It's a very visceral book, and I am a, firm believer in if you don't like to read something, that's completely okay. You don't have to read it, and so it's just better if you know beforehand that this content is there, so that you don't have to go, oh, wish I knew that was there before I picked this up. So I'm just going to bring it up now, because also I am going to be talking about it in this video, and I'm not going to censor myself, partially because I don't get paid for these videos, so I don't care, and also because, as an academic, I hate TikTok terms more than anything ever, because it is making it harder and harder to talk about these things in an academic setting, because people feel too it just feels like a taboo subject, and it shouldn't be a taboo subject, but that's besides the point. So on a more serious note, when it comes to this novel, if you are not comfortable with reading themes of sexual assault, or attempted sexual assault, or you just don't like reading those things, this novel probably isn't for you. And this is the only time I'm going to say this. It might be better to go look at the lexiconum than to actually read Fulgrim in this specific case, because this is a very sensitive topic, and not everyone wants to read it. And I completely understand if you don't. So you should just know that going in. That is part of this. But you should also expect that, I think, when it's a Slaanesh book. Once again, that is besides the point, but I'll also talk about it later. Now, the sensitive warning aside, here's all the funny warnings and reasons why you might not want to read this book. First of all, do you hate long books? Do not read this novel. It is like 500 pages long. I think it's more, actually. How many pages long are you? It's just, you know what? It's only 510 pages. It's fine. It's fine. Just read the book. If you hate piss and shit play, this book is not for you. If you just don't like people messing with bodily fluids in any way, shape, or form, do not read this novel. And most importantly, if you hate the Emperor's Children, this book's probably not for you. However, I would still encourage you in this case to probably read it anyways, just because of the stuff that happens in it. But I completely understand if you take one look at this and go, I want nothing to do with that. That's okay! Now, if you are an Iron Hands fan, this book is required reading, because I'm so sorry you have been shafted by GW, and this is one of 2 books where you're going to see Ferrus Manus. So, this is all you get. This is your only choice. If you're an Emperor's Children fan, I would say you should also read this novel, simply because you get to see how your legion ends up where it is today, and I think it's really interesting from, an Emperor's Children lore aspect view, so I really recommend that you read it. And in general, if you are a Horus Heresy fan who is not bothered by the things that I talked about in the beginning, yeah, you should probably read this book. It's got some important plot points in it, and I think the background is necessary for later events. Also, Ferrus Manus dies. So, like, I feel like you can't ignore that happens. Also, Fulgrim's soul gets slurped up with, like, a little fucking bendy straw. This isn't how it actually happens, but this is how I like to cope with what happens in this novel. You should have seen me the day I finished this. I was a completely different beast. I think I had an out-of-body experience. There's a video that I am not going to show you because I am like a fucking gremlin on crack in it, where I am sitting on my best friend's bed and going, I finished my Warhammer book, I need to buy more Warhammer book. And I had just taken a shower and I was on the coast, so my hair had poofed out of control. It was the worst point of my summer for me. All of that out of the way, let's actually talk about this fuck-ass book, shall we? First things first, how was it the reading experience of Fulgrim? And can I just say, I love horror. I write fantasy horror, and I specifically write body horror. So imagine my giddy little surprise when I got to read this book, and all of the horror was body horror. And like I've talked about before, Graham McNeil is great with descriptions, so this book was just like a terrible ride from start to finish, and I mean that in the best way possible. Every moment, I was horribly upset, and I had fun every step of the way, even though half of the time I was like, I need to put this book down because I cannot read this anymore. And I think why I really love this aspect of the novel is like, well, previous books kind of touch on the horror aspect of Warhammer. I think this one actually full sends it, if you will. It's uncomfortable, it's disgusting, it's perfect. That is kind of hilarious to say when it's Fulgrim's novel. Plus, the way that the book turns out and ends is kind of like, it's very fitting and very grimdark, all things considered. Like, there's definitely Warhammer novels that are way darker than this one, but like it's dark in its own unique way, where you're just looking at the situation and it's progressively just getting worse and more depraved, and you're like, oh my god, I know everyone is going to die at the end of this novel. But also, genuinely disgusting novel. I don't even, how do I even describe? I don't even know what scene I want to pull up to support how gross this novel can get. And you know why it's gross? You want to know why? It's Slaanesh. And Slaanesh conceptually is exactly what I wanted it to be. It's gross, it's disturbing, it has range. On a like more sexual end of Slaanesh as a concept, you know, you could have scenes that are as tame as, you know, a casual snake orgy, or as extreme as the Remembrancer Serena killing a man mid-climax. I don't even know what to do with that scene. I just had to bring it up because I was literally reading it like, what the fuck is happening? Why is she doing this? That scene was so wild, by the way. I don't even know how to unpack it. There's like, on one end, what the fuck? And on the other end, what the fuck? And then you like swing wildly from the sexual end of Slaanesh to the indulgent end of Slaanesh, and you can get something as simple as drug use and trying to chase the feeling of feeling something for once. But then you can get really complicated on what addiction is, and I can't even begin to get into all of this shit. I have to get into it later or else I will go insane. I'm trying so hard to contain this fucking video, but I'm going to fail when I get to the end, trust me. Genuinely though, I think reading this novel made me realize that I prefer the Chaos Gods as more like forces of nature rather than direct, I don't know, people, I guess you would say. They're not people, but things that exist that you can talk to. And I know that they do have like speaking roles and like characters interact with them and stuff, but I just like how there are these larger than life concepts that are always in the background, not really interfering directly as so much as like they are just present and there, and people's decisions lead to them manifesting, if that makes sense. I don't know if it makes sense. I just prefer this like passive interaction compared to a direct interaction, because I think it's scarier that way, because it's more of like a creeping sense of like there's no one pulling the strings, is what I'm trying to say. No one is pulling the strings here. They're just happening, and there's nothing you can do about it, and that adds to the horror for me. But that's okay, because while everything terrible ever is happening, you know who's back? Hey, motherfucking Soul Tarbits. Oh my god, they give me my baby boy. This is starting to get to the point of, man, we killed this character way too early. Let's utilize him a bit more, because he just keeps coming back. Of course, this is the last time he does it, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that he does come back quite often. It's okay, I thrive on the Tarbits crumbs, okay? I'm fighting a losing battle, and the only people below me right now are the Iron Hands fans, because once again, Ferris Manus got 2 books. All my excitement aside for a moment, though, while I do love Tarbits, I do also want to recognize that him being here is part of the larger problem with the Horus Heresy, where they just keep redoing storylines and it starts to drag on. And honestly, probably the only reason that I'm okay with it is because I'm happy to see Tarbits again. Other people definitely probably aren't okay with the redux of these books, and it's definitely part of the reason why the series got so long and bloated, and that is because continuous repeating of itself. But once again, I'm okay with it, because I genuinely love the cast in this. I thought I'd get a lot more annoyed with Emperor's Children in general, but they're not that bad. I think it's thanks to, like, we get different POVs, and not every single Emperor's Children thinks the same. In a weird way. So they have kind of the same overall goal, minus Tarbits. But they're not all thinking the exact same way. I think the only person in this novel, besides Eidolon, from the Emperor's Children, who I had an issue with, was Lucius. Go fuck yourself, Lucius. You know what you did. You are the reason we're here. But yeah, outside of Lucius and Eidolon, the rest of the Emperor's Children that we see, I think, are really interesting. Fabius Bile, strange little man. I want to read his trilogy series. Rylanor, the goat as per usual, and Solomon. Poor Solomon. There are 2 characters, however, that hold a particular interest for me, and that would be the Remembrancer Ostian? I think I'm saying that right? And Fulgrim himself. I'll get into why these 2 interest me so much at the end, but just know they make my brain do, like, the hamster wheel in my head is going 400 miles per hour whenever I see them in the same room. Ostian. Poor Ostian. I knew from the moment that Ostian came into being in this book that he was not going to make it to the end. I could tell right away. From the moment he told Fulgrim that his sculpture was too perfect, I was like, oh, this dude's dead by the end. Despite all that, I really like his POV, partially because it gives us a nice, like, normal human perspective to all of the bullshit going on, but also just because, like, he slowly becomes denial incarnate in a couple of ways until it's way too late for him to do anything about it, and he does end up dying in, like, the most poetic way possible. And then this book is so fucking weird. I know why it's weird, is the funny part. And I can tell you why it is so weird at the end. It's just, everything about him is strange, and he's a strange little man. And you know who else is strange? Fucking Fulgrim. First things first, I think Fulgrim is a surprisingly tragic character. I didn't think I would feel bad for him, if I might be honest with you. But after reading this, I honestly, like, completely changed my views on Fulgrim. And I love him a lot more as a character now. He kind of a bitch, though, and I have a feeling he's gonna continue to get bitchier, because now, if I'm understanding correctly, the thing in Fulgrim's body is not Fulgrim anymore. So he's gonna be different from how he was in this book. Also, side note, I desperately want to know more about his relationship with Ferris, and I feel robbed. I feel so robbed. I wanted to see more. I wanted to know more. And genuinely, why does GW keep pitting brothers against each other that I just want to see happy? Why do they keep doing this? Now, criticisms, and I have many for this novel. The biggest one, from a reading perspective, is definitely that this is just a long ass book, and while yes, it is like small in size, it is, it feels like a 500-page book through and through. And I think most of that has to do with the content within it. And what I mean is, I keep talking about how this book is very visceral and it can be very gross. And sometimes when you read that, you genuinely have to go, that was disgusting. I'm gonna put the book down and walk away for a little bit because what the fuck did I just read? And that happens so often that you're taking a ton of breaks, or at least I was taking a ton of breaks while I was reading this, and it just kept dragging on. And there's also the whole issue of like pacing in the novel, where there's so much stuff in it that pacing can vary wildly from place to place, and just overall it can kind of make the experience of reading this novel a bit draining, is the best way I can put it. I was tired of reading by the time I finished that novel, and I had to take a huge break before I could even start Descent of Angels, and even when I started it, I felt like I was dragging my feet through that entire novel just because I was still recovering from this, and also it's boring, but I'll talk about that next video. But yeah, there's quite a few scenes in this novel where I just had to put the book down for a second and think about them, and the reason that is because when I read, I genuinely picture the stuff that is happening. Like, I have a very vivid picture in my mind of what is on that page, and so it just hits me really hard, some of these scenes in this book, because, like, for example, when Serena starts painting the portrait with literal blood, piss, cum, and shit, the only, like, somehow the blood is the normal thing in this situation. Like, I would have accepted just blood. I would have been like, okay, a little bit edgy. No, that thing looks and smells like a porta potty for sure, and I just cannot handle these things in my mind today. You get my point. This book can be quite draining to read, despite how much I love a lot of the stuff in it. Hence why I both hate and love this book. But if that's the reading, what about the writing? And I'm gonna be so real with you. The disgusting descriptions that are making me put down this book, it's still primo content, okay? It's still incredibly important, I feel, to showing the entire gravity of the situation of the fall of the Emperor's children. Like, literally and figuratively, shit's fucked in this novel. It's gross and visceral description, just like in False Gods, and it's exactly what the novel needed. And you know what? Speaking of False Gods, while in False Gods, I think I talked about how I wasn't so into the characters there because I felt like they kind of felt flat and they didn't really evolve much. I actually quite love the characters here, and I mean it more than in the reading sense. I mean in the sense that, like, characterization I actually really like in this novel. I just think that because a lot more of these characters are McNeil's, he has more room to kind of work with them. He's not, like, building off of a template, he's building from the ground up with them, and that gives them time to evolve throughout the novel. It also helps that he only has this novel to work with them, so he has to move their characters along. And where there are returning characters, it doesn't bother me as much here if they don't get character development, because we are set in the past. These characters, technically speaking, they're done already. There is nothing to develop or do here. They are, like, literally some of these characters are dead. So I don't care much about their characterization. I care more about the new characters that were introduced, and I actually did enjoy those characters. Moving on from that, it's been a while since I've talked about, like, lore drops in these novels, and I think that's because I felt like there wasn't so much lore being dropped as there was characterization of and world building of certain, like, people and stuff like that. I wasn't learning anything new. I was just having prior knowledge expanded upon, and that continues in this novel as well. And part of that is really because the plot is not moving forward. But thankfully, what we do see expanded on is actually kind of just some really interesting stuff, like inter-legion relationships, how remembrancers can really function in certain legions, and, you know, in general, like, the Emperor's Children chicanery paired with, like, the Iron Hands, like, hints at their feelings towards generally everything. I think what really stands out in all of them is just the stuff we get to see with the Remembrancers. Because, I'm gonna be real with you, the Remembrancers that Fulgrim brought along are kind of like the stuck-up, fart-sniffing artists of high society. And I love to see what happens when you put them all on one ship, because they act exactly how you would expect them to act, but worse. So yeah, just in general, we get all of these, like, things that we already know about, and we just get to see it fleshed out more, which I really liked. Now, we can't wrap up this writing section without talking about the star of the climax of this novel, the drop site massacre on Isstvan 5. Fuck, man, here we go again. So I will admit that I did not get as emotional with the drop site massacre as I did with Isstvan 3, which is shocking. I know, I understand, but I want to make it clear that by not as emotional, I mean I wasn't brought to tears. I was still going fucking insane while I was reading this book. I was still gripping my hair, tugging at it, going, oh no, oh no, oh no. And I can definitely say the reason why this is because the circumstances around the drop site massacre are not the same as Isstvan 3. Isstvan 3 is a betrayal. Is the drop site massacre, while it has a betrayal, this is post, like, oh, we know about Horus's plans. So it, and also, like, there were 3 books building up to the Isstvan 3 to Isstvan 3. So, you know, there's a lot more at play with the first one than with the second one, and I'm sure other books, like, might go into more detail with the drop site massacre, and it might get me then. It's just in this specific case, I was not as emotionally invested yet because I didn't have as much time as with the first 3 novels with the drop site massacre here. Another factor is that the concert happened right before the drop site massacre, and if you don't know much about how you write tension, the concert is a major tension cut in the story, so it does kind of undermine the drop site massacre because so much of the tension has been spent on that moment of the concert where, I mean, what what the fuck do you even say there? Like, so much terrible shit happened at that concert. And you know what? This plays, once again, to the larger problem of this novel and my criticism for this section of my review. This book it's just got too much plot for one book. And the worst part is this isn't McNeil's fault, really. If you've not read the afterword to Fulgrim, he directly states that pretty much GW, they rounded up all the authors and they put them in a room and they were like, these are the books we want, someone pick one. This is what needs to be in it. So he literally was told that all of this shit had to be in Fulgrim. And he says himself, as he was writing, he was going on, and he was like, uh-oh, this is going to be a long book. And it is. And there's so much happening in it. And it's really hard to maintain tension when you have, like, 5 different climaxes, which is what happened in this novel. I think the worst part is that if we had stuck to the original plan, maybe I would have been more forgiving about this. But they didn't. They abandoned the plan. They didn't know originally that this stupid ass fucking prequel series was gonna be like 40 books long. And so this story suffers because of that type of planning. Like, Ferris Manus, I've been bitching about him all night, but he's the perfect example of wasted potential because he was required to die in this book. If you want my opinion on what Fulgrim should have been, it should have been like the first 3 novels. It should have been a trilogy series within the Horus Heresy. Because since we have decided that Ferris needs to die, and Ferris has got a huge, like, fucking plot synchronization with Fulgrim, and, like, everything happening there is going to lead to Fulgrim's fall, we need way more development on him and Fulgrim's relationship to make that ending scene with them far more impactful than it really actually was. I was sad during that scene, but I was not brought to tears by the thought of it like I was with Loken and Abaddon fighting each other, for example. Because we had 3 books to build up their relationship. Whereas this, to try and circumvent that, we get told about Fulgrim and Ferris's relationship, but we don't see it. We do not see it outside the view of a corrupted Fulgrim. So we can't fully grasp the tragedy of what's happening here. So, 3-book series. First book, instead of having all the stuff that we got told in this novel, instead that first book, we actually get to see it. We get to see Ferris and Fulgrim's developing relationship and how they became essentially best of bros. And, like, I want to see their competition because, yeah, we get told the competition, but we don't know the intricate details. We don't know if they had funny, like, well, I should say, it wouldn't be Ferris, probably. Well, actually, we wouldn't know, because he never got full characterization, because he died in 1 book. But we don't get to see if, like, maybe Fulgrim was trying to throw him off his game, so he was making quips during the entire competition. We don't know all the work that went into, like, them molding these weapons that ended up being perfect for one another, and they're like, oh, that's so funny, let's exchange them. We don't even get to see their first meeting. We just get told everything, that they're definitely best of bros, and fuck, I would have rather saw it. So, first book is that. Second book is the first half of Fulgrim, and then third book would be the last half of Fulgrim. And that way, if we split the book in 2, it is more digestible. And you know what? All of this is feasible, because what we will see in the coming novels is that they are perfectly fine with going back in time. Fuck, the next novel? So this actually, you know what, this isn't an excuse. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's not an excuse, because the next novel is literally all the way back to before the Great Crusade was even known to the Lion. So, really what I'm saying is, GW, what the fuck is with your planning? And this is why I hate this novel, because for all the aspects I love of it, it fumbles other things. And once again, it's not entirely McNeil's fault, because he was given what is essentially an impossible task. If he wanted to flesh everything out in this novel, it might have been as long as fucking Ulysses on my shelf. And I don't want to read a Warhammer novel that long. I didn't even want to read a novel that long. Rant over. You get my point. This is a huge, huge problem with this novel, and it genuinely, the amount of times people have told me they stopped reading after they read Fulgrim, completely understandable. Completely understandable. And it's why a lot of people are like, man, I wish I didn't have to tell you you have to read this book. But unfortunately, so many important plot things happen that it's just necessary. You have to read it. I'm gonna pet my dog to feel better. Welcome back. It's been 2 weeks since I last recorded this video, and a lot has happened that has kept me from, like, actually editing it together, because I just keep going out of town, and also, things just keep changing, and the pile is growing bigger, and I had to record this for a 3rd time, is what I'm saying. Who knew the simple academic section was going to be the bane of my existence for this video? But I think it's because I genuinely really want to get it right, because I have a lot to say, probably too much to say, and I have so many thoughts and feelings that I need to get out there. This novel is the whole reason I wanted to start my YouTube channel, and, you know, that's because after the first time I read it, it proceeded to live in my head rent-free. It's in my walls, tearing at my paper, eating my fucking food, and I don't even know where to begin with it, and that's probably why this section is so hard for me to talk about. Because I think there's a lot to say about Fulgrim, which feels really weird, because it's a Warhammer novel, and, like, that's something I've been grappling with recently, because up until this point, most of what I've had to say in this section is more like creative writing leaning, not literary analysis. And so it feels, like, silly to one half of me to, like, think about the Warhammer novel this way, but at the same time, there's so much going on in it that I really, really want to talk about it. In fact, I wanted to talk about it too much, so much, that I need to tell you something that I decided to do last summer. So, I'm actually the world's worst English student in that I actually haven't read a lot of the classics that are part of the literary canon up until I got to college. And one of those is The Picture of Dorian Gray. And the moment I read it, I went, oh wow, this is just Fulgrim. Or I guess more correctly, Fulgrim is just the picture of Dorian Gray. Which I didn't know. It's like a little fun fact that I think a lot of people know, but also I don't know how many of them have read The Picture of Dorian Gray, because I don't think you understand if you haven't. Fulgrim is just the picture of Dorian Gray. It is just the picture of Dorian Gray. It has stolen its whole ass look. And I'm sure to everyone else, that's just like a little fun fact, something we make fun of, just like with Dune, where we're like, oh, you know, it stole its whole look. It's just a repeat. Whatever. The problem is, to someone like me who has been Pavloved into doing nothing but analyzing moments like this, I unfortunately could not walk away the moment I learned this. In fact, I think it gave me brainworm disease. It made me really excited to eventually make this video, and I knew that this section was going to be big. So big that I was prepared to make it a part 2, hence this is a part 2, but then it got too big. Like, I'm writing an essay with secondary research too big. There are sources too big. And eventually it became that I cared so much that I wanted to kind of make it official. I wanted it to be done right. And I reached out to my honors English director at my college, because honors English for my college is writing an undergrad thesis. I applied and I got in. This is part of the reason why it took me 3 months to make the last video, because I was dealing with that whole process and dealing with whatever the hell I was even going to say. And I genuinely did not believe I was going to get in, yet here I am, writing an academic paper on Fulgrim that people will read, and it will be published professionally. So I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here now. I also knew in that moment that I wanted to make this video a part 2, as you can see it's part 1 here, just so that I can talk about my thesis proper once I'm done with it. That is what part 2 is going to be. I also wanted to separate it out because I don't want anyone to be feeling like they were forced to watch me ramble about Warhammer in a semi-serious manner. But if you are interested, I'd really appreciate it if you watch that video once it drops in like June, because that's how long it's going to take me to write this. But I'm in the process right now, which is part of the reason why this section keeps getting re-recorded, because turns out what you think your thesis is going to be when you first propose it, not what it's going to be when you're done. This whole situation has lived in my brain so rent-free that I have a dated quote here where my brother, who was asleep on my couch, I was asleep upstairs, I walked downstairs sleepwalking, and apparently I told him, I made a Fulgrim video, but I need to make another, and then I just went back to bed. I don't remember this, but it happened, so that's how much this has been on my mind. And I realize I didn't say it. If you don't know what a thesis is, essentially, it is a 25 to 30 page academic essay that is officially published and peer-reviewed and can be used as a secondary source by other researchers, which, once again, is quite insane. And I am not the only person who has written a paper on Warhammer, but I am going to be one of the few. In fact, I think I've read all of the papers on Warhammer, novels that I can, because I needed to for my research, and they are actually a little bit interesting, and some of them have to do with what I'm talking about today. So yeah, you'll have to wait a couple of months for my full thoughts on this section, but what I want to talk about today is some of the stuff that I don't think I'm going to get to talk about in my thesis itself. And since I'm still in the process of writing it, I cannot guarantee that these will or will not be in my end thesis, because, once again, you don't know what you're talking about until you're halfway done with it, and you're like, okay, this is what I am talking about now. I know for a fact this is what I wanted. Literally yesterday, my whole focus got shifted. Well, kind of. I just added to it. That's how insane this process is. So, what are some of the things that I think won't come up? Well, most of the thesis will be talking about Dorian Gray, and also, art. It's going to be called aestheticism and aesthetics, but it just translates to art. And aestheticism is Oscar Wilde, the author of Dorian Gray's, artistic philosophy that he kind of spearheaded and that the whole novel is about. So I expect that to kind of come up a lot in the thesis, and I don't want to talk about it too much here. But I do think I want to talk about, Slaanesh, and censorship, and also probably a bit about why the Primarchs were always gonna fucking turn out like this. So on a more serious note, Slaanesh. I think Dorian Gray was actually a great novel for Graham McNeill to choose because of what aestheticism eventually turns into, like philosophy-wise, because it starts out as this whole movement about art for art's sake, which is essentially the art should just be made to make art. The moment you give it meaning or anything like that, it's no longer art, it no longer has beauty, so on and so forth. That is a very SparkNotes version, and to help better illustrate this concept, any piece of political art, not art, and under aestheticism. Or, even more abstract, any piece of art that you feel has your heart and soul in it, like you are super attached to, also no longer art, because you feel like it's a part of yourself. That's how nitty-gritty this gets, but it actually evolves into a much larger movement called the Decadence movement. I think you can see where this is going. So the Decadence movement is essentially everything that is aestheticism cranked to 500. It's all about making beautiful, gorgeous art that is just absolutely rapturous to look at. It's all about opulence and overindulgence, and generally gets associated with a lot of hedonism, especially in Dorian Gray. Like, shit goes off the wire in Dorian Gray with how, for the lack of a better word, Slaanesh-y it can kind of get. The only thing that it doesn't go into is, like, the sexual aspect. Kind of. Like, things are still very sexualized, but it doesn't commit all the way because it is also incredibly, like, gay. It is incredibly gay. I don't mean that as an insult, I just mean it as a fact. Oscar Wilde was a closeted man living in the Victorian era when homosexuality had just become... Because homosexuality goes in and out of being, like, illegal. It's never not taboo, but it goes in and out of being, like, punishable crime. And it had just become a punishable crime when Oscar Wilde is, like, publishing this book back in, like, 1890s. So it doesn't stray all the way into sexuality, because that was tipping the line. Unfortunately, Oscar Wilde towed it so often that when he eventually went to court for being accused of sodomy, this book was used as evidence against him, and he was convicted of being a sodomite and went to jail for several years because of this novel right here. So really, he could have just went all the way is what I'm saying. So with that very brief description, I hope that really, like, illustrates why this is such a good foundation for Fulgrim, because it is literally the same storyline. It is about a man's fall from grace. And what Fulgrim has going that this doesn't is we have an actual god that we can put to the problem. And I do talk a bit more about some of the stuff that comes up in this conversation within my thesis, but for now, I think it works really well, and I think part of the reason that it works so well is that Graham McNeill is really willing to take risks with what he does. And I kind of talk about what role this plays a bit in the novel, in my thesis, but I think it works really well because Graham McNeill is willing to take risks with Slaanesh in this novel. Now, there are, like, 3 camps that Slaanesh falls into that I have noticed within the fandom. There's the camp that's like, Slaanesh isn't just sexual, they also have all these other aspects, but they go so hard into it that they kind of forget that Slaanesh is sexual as well. And then there's the camp where it's like, no, Slaanesh is sexual, but they go so hard into it that they forget all the other stuff as well. And then there's the middle ground, and I sit in the middle ground. There's a balance to be had when Slaanesh is involved, essentially. Now, I wasn't around when this happened. I've only been told this, and I've seen it online. From what I understand, there's a lot of concern that Slaanesh is going to be censored by GW, and that it kind of happened in the past where they got decanonized, and then they got brought back, and that was, like, part of it, like, something, they wanted to make Warhammer friendly, which, why? It's Warhammer. But also, I see a lot of the people who complain that they're going to censor Slaanesh talking about people who say that they should, but I've never actually seen anyone actually say, we need to censor Slaanesh. I've only ever seen people saying, like, the people are gonna do this, they're gonna do this. I personally don't think we should. Coming from, like, an academic and a writing standpoint, I think especially more sensitive taboo topics like sexual assault should be written about so long as they're done respectfully. And I, for one, think that Graham McNeil does it incredibly respectfully and actually does, like, really interesting, that's weird to say about sexual assault, he does interesting things that aren't commonly seen with the topic in Fulgrim. The biggest one being the victims of sexual assault in Fulgrim, or attempted sexual assault, dubious consent, so on and so forth, they're all men, which is not really very common, outside of it being a joke in media. And the thing was, none of these events were played up for laughs or anything like that. They were taken very seriously, and there were times where I had to, like, walk away because the way that McNeil writes it is unfortunately just too real in my brain. And I mean that in a good way. I mean it in a good way because Slaanesh, to me, is the scariest chaos god, and this is the way that they should be portrayed. What I mean by they're the scariest chaos god to me is I'm currently in a place where I'm fortunate enough to not live my life thinking war is constantly on my mind or conflict is constantly on my mind. So Khorne, he's scary conceptually, but not really a thing that's constantly on my mind. Nurgle, you know, I get sick. It happens, but I'm also not really scared of it. I'm just used to it. And as for Tzeentch, I don't really feel like people are gonna plot against me, and change is scary, but it's something I've been working on accepting. So Tzeentch is not as scary. He's probably second scariest to me, but he's not as scary as Slaanesh, because Slaanesh, there is the whole sexual assault aspect, but Slaanesh I feel like is too human in that it's also addiction and chasing the high of, like, endorphins and serotonin. And this is something that we're all already subject to. There is something right now that you are addicted to, that I am addicted to, at a smaller level. Maybe it's not, like, destroying our lives, but it's there. And all Slaanesh conceptually needs is that little inch for it to all fall apart. It's something that we all battle with every day. It can play into our procrastination. It can play into just generally not being able to function. It is a very real thing, and it's very scary to me because I hate what it represents, which is me not being able to do anything without the things that I'm addicted to. And then, once again, the very scary sexual assault part. Altogether, it's just a terrifying chaos god to me, and that's why I think Slaanesh is necessary. Because it's all around us, it's all the time, and it's generally, like, I think you should be able to write about taboo topics. I think you should be able to talk about them. So when I see it handled in the way that it's handled in Fulgrim, I think it's great. It is hard for me to read at times, but it's great. Warhammer's not 100% the best at this at all times. There are examples where I'm like, was that really necessary, guys? Was that really necessary? But so far, like, I've not run into an instance where I'm like, dude, that's just, like, you didn't need to write that at all. Like, personally, while reading. I'm sure this is a very touchy topic, and I'm sure it ranges for different people. But yeah, it's in my academic section because, like, this is something we constantly grapple with, both on the creative writing spectrum and the literary analysis spectrum. How do we talk about this topic? How do we address it? How do we write it? And I generally think that you should be able to do it. You should be able to do this if you're doing it respectfully. And yeah, it kind of does come up in my thesis, just a little bit, because of the way it's used in Fulgrim itself, which, once again, sounds like a weird sentence. It'll make sense when I talk about it at that time. But since we're talking about Slaanesh and addiction and obsession, let's talk about Fulgrim's addiction. And this is what I mean by Slaanesh is so scary, because Fulgrim is not addicted to what you would typically think is an addictive thing. Nowadays, when you think about modern addiction, I'm sure, like, the classics, drugs, alcohol, you could argue video games and phone usage, like, that sort of thing, gambling, that sort of thing comes to mind. Like, those are the big ones. But we don't talk about the conceptual ones that you can get addicted to. And for Fulgrim, that is perfection. He's obsessed with perfection. He's addicted to perfection. Whenever he does something that he perceives as perfect, it hits his brain the same way that a drug would hit your brain. This is also why he goes around and asks people to, like, give feedback on his art. Even though he knows it's perfect, he's going around getting feedback because it's a double hit when he gets it confirmed by others who perceive it as perfect. This is also why he did not react very well when Ostian told him it was too perfect and put it in a negative light, because that just isn't going to logically connect in his brain. He associates it as a positive thing, not a negative thing. And here's the thing. I think because of his obsession with perfection, Fulgrim, he was always going to fall to Slaanesh. I know that the lore suggests that it probably, like, Slanesh wanted Khan, but then got Fulgrim. I don't remember where that's said, that's just something I've heard, so don't quote me on that. But I think of the two, Fulgrim was probably far more susceptible. Maybe I'll be wrong when I go read Khan's POV, but for now, I think he was far more susceptible and was always going to be kind of in the road to do this. The reason for this is that, unlike the Emperor, who is a balanced man, the Primarchs are not. They've all had a specific trait attached to them. They've all had a specific trait attached to them, and then it's been cranked up to 100 so that it's like their special interest. The problem with that is that the reason why the Emperor can function and not be corrupted while the rest of them can't is because the Emperor has the balance of all of his traits working together. For example, like Conrad Kurz, the Emperor gets, I'm sure, terrible visions of the future, but he also has Sanguinius' good visions of the future to balance that out and not drive him completely mad. So if you take that same concept and apply it to Fulgrim, Fulgrim has this obsession and expectation of perfection, but he doesn't have the sort of realistic statistics to kind of temper himself that, like, Gilliman has. And mind you, of course, they're still people. They all have their, like, own little thoughts and quirks and things that have happened to them that have made them grow different than how the Emperor, like, expected. But at the same time, they all have, like, this one thing going on that they just fucking love, and it affects the way they act. It also affects the way that they take in information. Because, now, the Emperor was a stubborn man, and was definitely convinced that all of his shit would work out, but also at the same time, he had contingencies, like Russ, to take out his fellow brothers, for if stuff started to go awry. Fulgrim, he couldn't deal with stuff like that. Like, his whole legion has super cancer, and his obsession with perfecting the gene seed so that don't happen anymore was so insane that he was willing to splice his men up with alien organs just so that they wouldn't get super cancer anymore. Do I think the Emperor would have done that? You know, maybe. Now that I'm saying this out loud. Hopefully this doesn't destroy my whole point. What I'm trying to say is, Fulgrim took it to the, like, next step, you know, he took it to the other level that maybe the Emperor maybe he would have hesitated. Okay, maybe it would have been like, you know, I can use alien technology, but putting the alien organs in my soldiers, probably not the best idea. Then again, I don't know all the Warhammer lore. I've only been here for like 2 years, so I could be talking out my ass right now and I would have no idea. I hope you get the point, though. I think all of the traitor Primarchs were low-key set up to fail in some way, including the ones that are incredibly different than how they were supposed to be. Like, for example, Angron. Yeah, Angron is mad because of his nails and all the stuff that happened to him, but I think without all of that, he'd probably still betray his dad, because he was supposed to be the Emperor's empathy. He was supposed to be incredibly empathetic, and so, like, do you think he would have sided with his dad after watching all the genocide and conformity that is even within, like, the human race itself, what is happening to them? I don't think so. He didn't have any of those realistic expectations or, like, the intense loyalty to his father to balance him out. And really, this is a problem across all of the Primarchs. If you take 2 seconds to look at them, like, most of them were kind of like, you know, my dad's not that great. There were some that were undeniably loyal, but even amongst the loyalists, there were ones that were like, oh, you know, we kind of have no choice but to be here, but I'm not quite happy with it. It's, at the end of the day, just whether or not they had the, like, means and balance to not go insane because they were forced to do this. This is also playing off the fact that I don't think the Emperor, even if he had them from the beginning, would have been a very good dad. So there's a lot going on here. Point being, I think this really illustrates that Fulgrim was kind of fucked from the beginning. And I think it really just illustrates the power of what the concept of Slanesh can have on people. And I think this is also backed up by the fact that most of what I've read of the Horus Heresy so far, it's not dealing with Tzeentch, it's not dealing with Khorne, and it's not dealing with Nurgle. There's more Nurgle than the other two, but it really, you just keep getting Slanesh. You just keep getting Slanesh things happening because she's the most, like, chaosy, human-y chaos god. And I think that's something that's really interesting that I've observed throughout all of Fulgrim. It's, like, a present concept. It is just pointing at us, the people, and being like, this is kind of what we like. isn't it? This is just kind of like what we're predisposed to. You know how easy? Like, I could point to things in real life. Where the Olympics is happening right now. Have you heard the rumors about the concrete, the fucking, the cardboard beds and how many condoms they go through? Like, come on, guys. We just like to feel good, and we're willing to do anything to feel good, whether that is pay exorbitant amount of money or do drugs. You know, that's just what people are like. Fulgrim, unfortunately, is not a man who could save himself. And even when the people around him are trying to help him out, rather than listening to them, he would rather go with the people who are encouraging him, because that's what makes him feel better. Other than that, I know I said I would talk about whatever else comes to mind, but I can't think of anything else. So truly, was it really that important? Really, I'll stop there, because these are the two things that I know I'm not going to get to talk about in my thesis. Everything else is kind of on the table for me right now, like a lot more than I expected is on the table for me right now. And I think I'll get into it there. If I forget something, then oh well. That sucks. That gives you guys, if you want to, more time to talk about it yourself, because I think despite all of the problems with this novel, there are some really interesting things happening in the background. And that's usually how it ends up turning out to be, honestly. Like, unironically, if you've never read any of the staple books within the, like, Western literary canon, you'll find that some of them, incredibly boring. Why are they there? And yet, they're there because they had stuff to say and, like, techniques and story beats and stuff like that that were so influential that we still find them in our writing to this very day. And no more is this evident than the picture of Dorian Gray's influence on Fulgrim. So other than that, that's the end of the video. I'm officially signing this off. I will not record any more instances. I'm in fact going to go edit this right now so that you don't have to wait any longer for this video to come out. Thank you so much for watching. Please tell me your thoughts below, especially because I am rambling more academically about a novel in this video, and I would be happy to either talk about it more or like even debate it with you if you have other ideas about what's going on. So yeah, other than that, have a good day.